Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to show you how you can deploy Flask app using AWS ECR and AWS EC2. So let's begin. So let's first of all set up our EC2 instance in our AWS console. So head up to your console and now head up to your EC2 service inside the dashboard. And now we can create an instance. So for creating an instance, you can click on launch instance here, or if you have previous instances in your AWS account, you would view them here. But I do not have currently any instances, so I'll create an instance using the launch instance button. Then I can name it anything, something like Flask, web server, or if I want to keep it more general, I'll just name it web server. And now I can choose an OS for my instance. I prefer Ubuntu because it is worldwide used and it is, I think, the most used OS image for a web server. Now I'll choose my machine image, which I'll just keep it as Ubuntu 24.04. And for the instance type, I will keep t2.micro because that's free and eligible. And then for the key pair login, I can choose any key pair I want. If you do not have a key pair, you can create that using the create new key pair button. But this key pair is required for SSH access, so it doesn't matter for us right now. Alright, for the network settings, we need to enable HTTPS and HTTP traffic for public to basically access our instance using the public IP address. So basically, people can hit requests on our server by allowing these both services for our network settings. Alright, so now I think I'll just keep all the other configurations as it is, and now I'll create the instance by clicking on launch instance. Alright, so my instance has now been created, so I'll now head up to the instances list. And by refreshing it, I should see my instance right here. Perfect. So now we can move on to the coding part. So I have made a sample Flask app here, which is present in this folder. So this is just a single page of website which just shows this is a sample Flask project. So we're going to deploy this app on our EC2. So first of all, we have to build an image for this app, and then we have to push that image to ECR. So ECR is basically AWS service for Elastic Container Registry. So that basically stores all the kind of images, like Docker images. So I'll head up to ECR first of all. And if I go inside repositories, I can see that I already have a Django app repository, which I had created earlier. So I'll now create a Flask app repository as well. You can create the repository by this button, or you can also create repository using the command line. So before using AWS commands, we need to configure AWS into our account, into our system. So now I'll show you how you can configure AWS in your system. All right, guys. So now I'll show you how you can create access keys for your AWS account. So head up to your AWS console and then head up to your profile section, uh, your profile down bar, and you can see the security credentials tab here. Now click on that. And now scroll down to the manage keys section and you can click on create access key here. And now it will ask you to create the keys for a particular user. You can select the user for which you want to create some keys, but I'll just select the root user, which has all the permissions. But you can select any particular user which has limited access to the AWS services. So I'll just create a access key for my root user here, and I click on create access key. So here's the uh, access key ID and secret access key as well. You can copy these and set up in your AWS configure in a terminal. All right, so the second thing includes is downloading the AWS CLI package. You can install it for Windows through the MSI installer. You can search for AWS CLI install, and you can head up to the first link here, and now go down in the Windows section, and you can head up to the AWS CLI official link, which is present right here. And now you can install it any way you want, and you can run this package like this and just follow through all the setup process and install the AWS CLI. All right, it is already installed for me, so it will not walk me through all the steps, but those are just simple steps which requires access to directories or permissions, something like that. For installing AWS CLI in your Linux system, the commands are relatively simpler. So you just have to hit a call request to AWS CLI server, and then you have to unzip the file you have installed here, and then just run this command sudo AWS install. That will install AWS CLI in your Linux system. All right, so after you install AWS CLI, you can head up to your terminal. You can first restart your device and then head up to the terminal and look for AWS hyphen hyphen version to verify if AWS CLI has been installed or not. And if you get a version number just like this, that represents that your CLI has been installed. Now, for configuring the AWS CLI for multiple services, basically to configure your AWS account inside terminal, you can run the command AWS configure, and now you can enter all the access keys and all the secret access and also the region name, which are present right here. As you can see, I've already entered it, so it shows me a value right here, but it will show none if you have entered nothing as of now. All right, so I'll just click on enter because I don't want to change it right now. And AWS secret access key, you'll put the secret access right here. For the region name, just put the region name in which you're working. And for the default output format, you can keep it none as of now. All right, I know AWS has been configured now. So now you can start working with AWS. So now I'll show you how you can create a repository inside your AWS ECR. So for this, we can run the AWS ECR create repository command, and then we can pass in a repository. Then I can pass in the repository name flag, which I can keep something like Flask App or something like that. And then I can pass in my region name by region, which is AP South 1 for me. So if I click on, so if I run this command, I should have a repository inside my AWS ECR account. All right, so if I refresh this, and after refreshing this, I see another repository here, which is Flask app. So perfect. Now we can push our Flask images to this repository. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is creating a Flask Docker image for our Flask app. So how do we create that? Is first of all, I have a standard Flask image, Docker image written for Flask app right here. So first of all, we can take the base image as Python, and I can set the work directory as /app, and then I've copied my requirements.txt to the root of the image. Then I have installed the requirements using pip install -i requirements.txt, and then I've copied the whole of my Flask app to the root of a Docker image. And then exposing the 5000 port and just running the Python app.py command, which is the command to run uh, a Flask app. So if you want to run, you can also use Gunicorn to run the Python app. So how I will show you how you can use Gunicorn for this as well. So for running a Gunicorn, for running a Flask app using Gunicorn, you can write the command which goes something like, all right, so I'm going to write Gunicorn, and then I'm going to define the workers for this, which is going to be -w, and I'm going to define 3 workers for this, or any amount of workers you need. Let's just go for 3 here. And then I can bind the local host to this, which is 0.0.0.0 port 5000. And then I can write the app inside my app, which is going to be app, and the name here is app as well. All right. So I'm going to reference to this app inside my Docker file. All right, so I think I've built the image here. And now I'll create an image. I'll build the image by running the Docker build command. So for this, obviously, you need to have Docker installed on your system. If you do not know how to install Docker, you can watch our previous video on how to install Docker in your system. All right, so I'll just verify if Docker is working for me. Yes, it is. So now I'll build this image. How I'll build this is first of all running the Docker build command. And before that, I'll just check if I have any previous images for me. All right, so I have some images regarding Django and nginx, but I'll just keep them as it is. So now I can run Docker build -t, and the name of image I want to keep, which can be something like class, something you want, -f for referencing to the file of the Docker file, which is dockerfile.flask. And then I'm going to write the full stop to reference to the root of Docker image. All right, so I'm just going to copy this command and first of all go inside the Docker folder where my full app lies and also my Docker files. And now here I'll run this command. So this will create a Flask image for me. All right, so image has been created. I'll just verify it using Docker image, and I see the Flask image right here. So now I'll just verify if it's working or not by running a command Docker run Flask, which will run the Flask image on my local system. All right, so I had not installed Unicorn using pip inside my image. So I'll just install that using pip install unicorn. If you do not have that in the requirements.txt, you can install it explicitly, just like I'm doing. So I'll just build the image again using the C command, and then I'll run this image to test if my Flask app is running or not. All right, so the Flask app is running perfectly as it says booting worker with PID and there's no errors. So that means our container is running perfectly fine. So I'll just remove this container. I'll just stop this container. First of all, I can see that or as a container is stopped. Now I can move on to pushing this image to AWS ECR. So for this, we can first of all log in our AWS ECR account into our login into our Docker system. So how to log in that AWS ECR command is by running a function, a command which goes something like AWS ECR get login password, and then we'll pass the region, which is going to be US East 1, and then the pipe, and then I can pass in again Docker login hyphen username, which is going to be AWS, and the password is going to be just standard in, which can I can write by password SPDIN, and then I'm going to pass my ECR repository URI, which is uh, which is just this part of my repository name. So I'll just paste it right here, and or I just passed the region wrong, which was actually AP South 1, and now it should say login succeeded. All right, perfect. As it says login succeeded, so now we can move on to the next part, which is actually pushing this image to our AWS ECR repository. All right, so before pushing the image to ECR, we need to first of all tag the image to our ECR account. So how we can tag that image is by running the command docker tag. So for this, we can run the command docker tag, and then the name of my image, which is Flask right here, and then I'm going to tag it to my repository URI, and then I'm going to tag it to slash the name of repository, which is Flask App, I believe. Yes, it is Flask App, and then I can uh, name it something like not the latest tag, but something like Flask tag, so I can reference it later using the Flask tag. All right, so I've tagged that image, and now I'll just push this image by just replacing the tag with push and also removing the Flask, which was the original name of our image. So now pushing the image, this should start the pushing process. All right, so our image is getting pushed. Let's just wait for it to get pushed, then we can move on to the next process. All right, so our Flask image is now pushed. I will just verify it by going to my repository, and if as I can see, the Flask image is present, so the Flask task is done. Now we can move on to the next part, which is pushing an nginx image for reverse proxying. So nginx will be used to redirect requests from the root URL, which is just a slash, to the port 5000, which is where our Flask app will be served. So we need to make a nginx configuration for that, so our app can work on the root URL instead of 5000 port. All right, so how to do this is we can just create a simple nginx Docker image, and for that we need to have a Docker file nginx. So, and for this I have taken the base image as nginx, and then I've removed the original configuration file, which was default.conf inside this directory, and then I've copied my default.configuration inside this directory. So now what is my default.configuration is present right here, which is default.conf. So I've created a default.conf file. This is just a sample, a standard configuration file for nginx for a Flask app. This is actually for a Django app, but we can make it for a Flask app by naming the container. This is the this will be the name of the container we put in our EC2 instance while making the Docker Compose file. So we will be running Docker Compose file, and inside that will be two services, which is the Flask app and nginx, which will run both simultaneously. So we have the Flask, which will be the name of container of a Flask app, and we have the 5000 port for it. All right, now for the server name, we can pass the public IP of our EC2 instance. So I'll just check out what the public IP of our EC2 instance was. All right, so this is the IP address for a public IPv4, and I just copy it here and paste it here. Perfect. And now I've just passed some additional parameters here, like the proxy set header host and the XML IP and X forward. These are just standard parameters while setting up a nginx configuration file. All right, perfect. So now I'll build the nginx image by the command. Again, we're going to use the docker build command, docker build -t, something like nginx, and then I'm going to build it using the file, docker file, .nginx, and then I can write full stop. All right, so this will build our nginx image for us. All right, so the image has been created. Now we can tag the image to our AWS account by the command docker tag and the name of and the you basically our URI of ECR account. You can head to ECR and then I can just copy the URI, which is still amazonaws.com. I'm going to tag it to here / Flask App. And then I'm going to pass the tag as nginx, so I can refer to it as nginx tag. Um, I forgot to add the target image, so that's going to be nginx for us. So we have tagged our image. If I just check the Docker images, I should have the tagged nginx image as well. All right, this is the tagged nginx image. Now I can push this image by running the same command, just replacing the tag nginx with push. Now this shall push our nginx image to AWS ECR. All right, so the image has been pushed, and I think most of the coding part from our local system has been completed. Now we can head up to our EC2 and the AWS console for ECR. And I'll just check here if I have got my nginx image or not. Yeah, so nginx image has been pushed here. Perfect. And now we can move on to setting up our EC2 instance. All right, so now first of all, I'll connect to my EC2 instance. Connecting, you can select this instance and then click on connect. And I'm going to connect it using EC2 Instance Connect, which will connect my instance inside my browser itself. So I'll just let it connect to the instance. All right, so I've connected it. I'll just import some basic libraries. Like first of all, I'll just update the repository package list, and now we can import Docker and Docker Compose as well on our instance to run the images of Nginx and Flask. All right, so I've upgraded those. Now I'll install Docker and Docker Compose by running the command sudo docker sudo app install Docker and docker.io actually, and then Docker Compose as well. So we're going to install them. I'll just pass the -y flag for agreeing to all of the terms. All right, so Docker and Docker Compose have been downloaded. Now we can install AWS CLI as well on our system. So for installing AWS CLI, we can hit a curl request to the AWS CLI downloader. So how to hit a curl request is just write the curl, and then I can pass the URL for the AWS CLI endpoint, which is pps / AWS CLI.amazonaws.com /AWS CLI exe linux x86 -64 dot zip, and then I'm going to output is it as something like AWS CLI dot zip. So we have to unzip it later. So I'll hit a call request, and if I see in my ls, I'll just see a zip file here, which is the AWS CLI zip. So now I'll unzip this file using unzip command. For this, I need to install unzip as well. So I'll just install it using sudo apt install unzip, and now I can unzip this file by running the command unzip and the name of a file, which is aws cli.zip. So this will start the unzipping process. So let's just wait for this to unzip, and then we can move forward to the next process. All right, so we have unzipped our AWS CLI. Now we can install it using the command sudo and the path to the unzipped AWS folder, which is /AWS. slash install to install the AWS CLI. Alright, so if I now run the AWS -FN version command, it should return me a version. And yes, it does indeed. So we have installed AWS in our account. Perfect. And now we can configure our AWS account using AWS configure. So we can configure it using AWS configure. So first of all, I'll just use sudo AWS configure, and now I can enter my keys for this. All right, so now I've configured my AWS CLI. As you can see, if I click on AWS configure, it should show my credentials, not the AWS configure, but the sudo AWS configure. So I'll run sudo AWS configure, and I can see I've inputted all the fields right here. Perfect. Now we can log in our ECR account inside the Docker of an instance. So how do we do that? It's the same we did in our local system by running the command AWS ECR. First of all, we need to add sudo. We can run sudo AWS ECR, get login password, then the pipe, and we need to also add the region name. So I'll just add it here, region, which is AP South 1 for me. And then we can put Docker. And also we need to put the sudo before that. Sudo Docker login. The username is going to be AWS, and the password is going to be the standard info. And now I can pass in my repository URL, which is this right here. So I'll just copy this and paste it here. Alright, so if I run this command, it should say login succeeded, and it does indeed. So we haven't logged in inside our Docker, inside our EC2 instance through ECR repository. All right, so now we can move on to the next step, which is taking a pull of all the images. Before that, I can simply create a Docker Compose file, which will have both the images pulling and also configuring them to run together. Then we can just build the Docker Compose file by running Docker Compose up -fn build, and that will run both the services for us. All right, so now we have to create the Docker Compose file. So for that, we can just simply write sudo nano docker compose.yml, and this shall create a Docker compose.yml for us. All right, so now we can configure this file. And how to configure this is simply there's a standard format for configuring this file. So I'll just configure it for you. So first of all, you have to write the version for Docker Compose. What's for the version, we can write something like 3.8. Then I can start declaring my services. So for declaring services, we have to use the services keyword. For that, I just write services, and then I can start naming my services. So for service, we have the Flask app. So I'll just name it Flask, and I'll keep it as Flask. Then I'm going to start referencing the image. So for the image, we have our repository URI, and then the path to our Flask image, which will be Flask app, and the tag for that image was Flask. All right. So now we can also write the container name. This is the container name which we had reference to in our nginx configuration file. So if I look out for this, this was the name here. This is Flask. So I'm going to name my container as Flask. Now I can set the command restart as always. So my services always boots up when the system restart. And then I can expose the 5000 port for my Flask app. All right, so now I can set the nginx file and nginx service. So for the setting that, first of all, I'll name it nginx. Then I'll refer to the base image for this, which is again the repository URI, which is Flask app, and the tag of that image was nginx. Now I can name the container using container name, and I'm going to name this container as something like nginx. And then I'm going to again put the restart parameter as always. And then I'm going to add one more parameter here, which it depends on, which will be equal to our Flask service. So if Flask is not correctly booted up, then our nginx will also stop automatically. All right, so we have set it right here. And then I can again write the ports configuration, which is going to be the 80 to 80 configuration for nginx. All right, so this is a basic Docker Compose file for a Flask image running through nginx. So this shall work for us. I'll just save it using Control O, X, Enter, and Control X. And now I can run the sudo Docker Compose file by running the command Docker Compose, sudo Docker Compose up, compose up, and hyphen hyphen build. All right, so this should take the pull of the images inside our Docker Compose file and also build them for us. So I'll just run this command and let's see if our app gets started or not. So first of all, it's going to take the pull for a Flask app, then it's going to take the pull for nginx, and then it's going to start up the services according to our Docker Compose file. All right, so we can see our Docker Compose file has started, and I think our Docker and Flask, our nginx and Flask services are running good. So I'll just see by going to our public IP. So for the public IP, which is right here, and I can go to it in my browser itself. And for this, I have to remove HTTPS because I do not have an SSL certificate currently active. And so yeah, so you can see this. The page says this is a sample Flask project, which is the original project I had made for this testing purpose. So we have successfully deployed our Flask app using ECR and EC2. So yeah, I think that's it for the video, and thanks for watching.